Okay, so picture this. You're listening to your new favorite song, right? And it's super catchy, you know? But then you find out it wasn't written by, like, a human artist at all.
Whoa.
It was written by AI.
Wow.
And that's not even like some futuristic scenario. That's actually happening right now.
Yeah.
And it's causing a huge legal battle with these big record labels like Sony and Universal going head-to-head with AI music startups, specifically Suno and Udio.
Right.
And it all comes down to copyright infringement. So today we're doing a deep dive into all of this. We're going to like break down the arguments from both sides and, explore just how much this could totally change the future of music as we know it.
Yeah, it's a fascinating situation, right? Because you have like these established industries and they're basically grappling with this like disruptive technology, right? And so the music industry has always been built on this foundation of copyright, protecting the creative work of human artists, right? But then AI comes along and it claims to be able to like learn from music and generate its own original output.
Yeah.
And it just gets really complicated. So these lawsuits are really trying to figure out, like, what are the rules when AI wants to join the band, so to speak?
And speaking of the lawsuits, let's get into, the record label side of things. They're basically saying that Suno and Udio, they built their AI models on a ton of illegal downloads, right? So they're basically accusing them of using, like, stolen goods as the foundation of their whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, their argument really centers around how these AI models are trained. Because to compose music, AI needs to analyze tons and tons of data, right?
Right.
So the record labels are claiming that Suno and Udio basically fed their AI this huge buffet of copyrighted songs, and they did it without permission.
And they didn't pay for it. They didn't ask. Nothing.
Exactly.
Wow.
It's almost like, if you imagine a chef in training, and they were caught, like, stealing recipes from some famous chef.
Yeah.
And then, like, passing those dishes off as their own creations.
Yeah.
It wouldn't go over very well.
No, not at all. And to make it even worse, the lawsuits, they actually have these specific examples.
Right.
Where the songs that the AI generated sound almost identical to really famous songs. It's almost like they're digital clones, which is kind of creepy when you think about it.
Yeah.
I read about one example, and it was a song that sounded so much like Sway by Michael Bublé.
Oh, wow.
It was so close, you probably wouldn't even be able to tell the difference.
Right, and that's really the core of what the record labels are arguing, right? They're saying these AI outputs are so similar to the songs that they own that it's directly hurting their business.
Yeah, it devalues the original.
Exactly. Because if anyone could just generate a perfect copy of any song using AI...
Why would you buy music anymore?
Exactly. Why would anyone buy music? It totally undermines the whole point of copyright law, which is supposed to protect and encourage creativity.
And it's not just a few songs, right?
Yeah.
This is huge. I mean, this case, it could send shockwaves through the entire music industry.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if Suno and Udio, if they win this thing, it would set a precedent that would be terrifying for artists and creators.
Yeah.
Because it could mean that AI is free to use any copyrighted material, not just music, books, movies, everything.
And they could just say, like, oh, well, we're just, we're training.
Exactly. We're just learning. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a nightmare scenario for the record labels, for sure.
So how does Suno and Udio defend themselves? I mean, they can't exactly deny that their AI needs music to learn.
Right, and that's where it gets really interesting. They're arguing that their technology isn't about just copying. It's about learning and transforming the material. So they're not ripping off songs, they're absorbing influences and then creating something totally new.
It's like when a musician learns,
Yeah.
you listen to a bunch of different artists, a bunch of different genres, and it all kind of blends together.
Right, exactly.
Like you could say that a musician is inspired by, like, I don't know, Jimi Hendrix, but that doesn't mean they owe him royalties for their own original songs.
Exactly. They're drawing a parallel between how human musicians grow and what their AI is doing.
Okay.
And in fact, Suno has admitted to using publicly available music from the internet to train their AI. And they've acknowledged that some of it might be copyrighted.
Oh, really?
But they claim that it falls under fair use.
Ah, fair use.
Of course.
The two words that always seem to cause a debate.
Always. Always. Guaranteed to stir up some controversy.
Right.
It's not always so clear cut.
Yeah.
And it's in that gray area where these two sides are really like butting heads, Suno and Udio are clinging to this idea of fair use like it's their lifeline.
Right.
While the record labels are doing everything they can to like tear that argument apart.
So it really comes down to whether or not training an AI on copyrighted music so that it can create songs that could be sold commercially, you know.
Right.
Is that considered transformative enough to actually count as fair use? I mean, talk about walking a tightrope, legally speaking.
Yeah.
But even beyond, the legal arguments and all that, it feels like this really gets at the core of what music even is,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Where's the line between, like, being inspired by something
Yeah.
and straight up infringing on some work?
I mean, that is the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's something people have been debating forever, especially in music. I mean, think about it. Like, music has always built upon itself, right? You have borrowing, sampling, reinterpreting.
Right.
And the record labels, though, they're really focusing on the financial side of things. Like, they're saying that Suno and Udio are creating music through AI that's directly competing with the artists that they represent.
Right, so they're cutting into their profits.
Exactly. They see it as a replacement,
Yeah.
not a transformation. So, in their view, it can't be fair use.
So it comes back to that age-old debate. Who gets to profit from creativity? I mean, if it's an AI making the hits, who gets the reward? And what does that even mean for, like, the human musicians who are trying to make a living doing this?
That's where it gets really complicated. And honestly, we're in uncharted territory here.
Yeah.
This case could very easily set a precedent that determines the rules for AI and copyright for, like, decades to come.
Yeah.
And the thing is, this isn't just about music, right? Think about it. What if a novelist used an AI that was trained on, like, all of Shakespeare's work to write a bestseller?
Right, or a filmmaker. They could use AI that was trained on classic films.
Exactly, and they could create a blockbuster.
Yeah.
And then you have all the same questions, right? Inspiration versus infringement, fair use versus, like, just taking advantage. It applies to everything.
It's like we're opening up this whole Pandora's box of legal and ethical issues.
Totally.
And the music industry, they're right there on the front lines dealing with it.
They are, with incredibly high stakes. The future of music, the livelihoods of actual artists, even just the way we define creativity, it's all uncertain.
Right.
But Suno and Udio, they're not backing down. In fact, they're fighting back pretty hard. And it's interesting, they're using the record label's own history to argue their case.
Oh, now that's interesting. So they're basically turning the tables. Okay, tell me more about how they're doing that.
So they're pointing to a specific part of the Copyright Act of 1971 that deals with sound recordings.
Okay.
And basically, this provision says that if a new recording doesn't directly copy the actual sounds from an existing recording, then it's not considered infringement.
Oh, wow.
Even if it imitates the style or the arrangement of the original.
So they're saying because their AI isn't directly sampling from those existing songs.
Right, they're not using the same samples.
Okay.
They're emphasizing that this provision, it was actually created to protect the music industry from too many lawsuits, to prevent every song that sounded kind of similar from, like, triggering a huge legal battle.
It sounds like they're using the record label's own playbook against them.
Yeah. It's pretty bold.
Wow.
And they don't stop there. They're also saying that the record labels, they're just trying to use this lawsuit to stop innovation and maintain their control over the industry.
So it's like this David and Goliath story, but with algorithms and copyright law.
Right. And Mikey Schulman, who's the CEO of Suno, he's been very vocal about this. He's saying that Suno was actually in talks with some of these record labels.
Really?
To work together,
To collaborate.
Exactly. To figure out a way to make this work for everyone, like to make the pie bigger. But then the lawsuit happened and everything just stopped.
So he's saying that they were trying to find some common ground and then the record labels just came at them with everything they had.
That's his perspective, yeah.
Sure.
And he's also pointing out what he sees as hypocrisy because, like, record labels have always embraced new technology.
Right, exactly.
Huh?
I mean, think about it. Vinyl, cassettes, CDs, streaming, they've adapted and made a lot of money along the way.
Right. So why the resistance to AI now?
Yeah, it makes you think. I mean, it's kind of how it always goes, right? When you have a disruptive technology, sometimes industries embrace it and sometimes they fight back as hard as they can.
Yeah.
And right now, seems like the record labels, they're choosing to fight because they see AI as a threat.
To their bottom line, for sure.
Right, yeah.
But Suno and Udio, they're saying that AI could actually help the music industry.
Okay.
That it could create new opportunities, help them reach new people, maybe even find new ways to make money.
So it's not just a legal fight, it's a fight for the future of music.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just the law,
Right.
public opinion matters a lot too. Like, how are musicians going to feel about this?
Right, right. The fans.
And just the culture at large. How are they going to see this whole thing between AI and the music industry? It's a big deal.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. And there's no easy answer, but it's definitely something to think about, especially with AI becoming more and more advanced,
Yeah.
you know,
Right.
and it's impacting all parts of our lives. So these kinds of debates, they're only going to become more and more common, I think.
Absolutely.
I mean, it really feels like with this case, we're seeing a turning point for the music industry, don't you think?
Mm.
It brings up all these questions about technology, about what creativity even means, about ownership. Like, where do we even start trying to understand all of this?
It's a lot to unpack, for sure. One of the things Suno and Udio talk about that really makes you think is this whole idea of originality in music.
Oh, okay. So are they basically saying that there's no such thing as a truly original song? Especially because, like, music has always been about artists being inspired by what came before them.
Yeah, that's basically their argument. They're saying that music has always been built on these shared influences, right? Borrowing, reinterpreting, taking an idea and making it something new.
Right.
And they ask, like, if you could strip away all of those layers of inspiration, what would even be left that we could really call unique?
Hmm. So they're saying that AI is basically just taking that natural evolution of music and, like, pushing it forward.
Exactly. And they actually point to music history to support that idea. So, like, when instruments like the electric guitar or the synthesizer were brand new, some musicians were really against them.
Really, they were skeptical.
Totally. They resisted those changes. But eventually, those tools changed music. New genres were created. The whole world of music expanded.
Yeah, that's true.
So Suno and Udio, they're presenting AI as just the next step in that process.
It is an interesting point, but I'm sure the record labels would say there's a big difference between choosing to play a new instrument and using AI to copy someone's style without asking.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And that's where the ethics of all of this get really tricky.
Yeah.
Even if Suno and Udio win legally, those questions about being ethical, about giving credit where it's due, those are going to stick around.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, being inspired by someone is one thing, but if you're using AI to sound exactly like them without saying so,
Yeah.
it feels different, doesn't it?
It does. I think transparency is really important here.
Right.
Suno and Udio keep saying their AI is transforming the material, that it's making something new. But if they're not open about the data they're using to train their AI, then how can anyone really know?
It's like that thing where a chef says they invented a dish, but it's actually based on a really old recipe.
Exactly.
If they don't acknowledge that, it feels dishonest.
Yeah, totally. And even if the result is innovative, that lack of transparency, it just makes people suspicious.
Right.
So for Suno and Udio, it's not just about winning in court, it's about getting musicians and music fans to trust them.
So it seems like for AI to really work in music, it has to find a way to exist alongside human creativity, not try to replace it, right?
Exactly. It's about collaboration.
And honestly, that's a conversation we need to be having.
Totally agree. And really, this case is forcing us to have that conversation. It's making us confront these complicated issues head on.
Yeah, it really is a turning point, not just for music, but for any kind of creative work.
For sure.
So as we're wrapping up our deep dive today, what's like the main takeaway for our listeners? What should they be thinking about as they're navigating this whole world of AI music?
I'd say more than anything, stay informed, be aware of what's going on, and form your own opinions. Don't just accept what one side or the other is saying. Do your own research, listen to the arguments, and decide what you think about all of it, because it's about the future of creativity.
Well said. As this legal battle goes on, keep listening, keep learning, and be curious. This is just the beginning, and music is going to keep changing in ways we probably can't even imagine.